All right. So today, guys, we have something very special. It's been a while since our last podcast, and you guys know very well that I'm very selective with my guests. Today we have Micah Coley. He's actually known as HollywoodMechanic. So if you guys want to look him up, he's a very knowledgeable guy. I actually found him on YouTube. I think it might have been either on YouTube or Instagram. I'm not too sure which one came first, but I think it was YouTube, and I stumbled upon one of his. He was talking about the carbon ceramics that we have today on Supercars. And it's basically all one system. Maybe he can correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure, Micah, it is all basically the carbon ceramics on every supercar. It's almost all the same except for the diameter and the calipers. The size of the calipers change, right?
There are different, like Porsche has its own PCCB, its own like proprietary blend there. Obviously, race cars are a carbon, not carbon ceramic. The
Right.
carbon, obviously doesn't get useful until it gets hot. So obviously,
Right.
don't want that on a street car. And then I know Porsche also has a newer brake system that's like in between the cost of a iron or steel rotor and
Right.
carbon ceramic. So there are some variations, but for the most part, Brembo makes a majority of rotors for every brand. You'll see the same rotors on McLarens,
Correct.
Porsches, Ferraris, Lamborghinis. So
Cool.
for the most part, they're pretty similar.
Yeah, so Micah, again, what I was trying to say was that he's extremely knowledgeable, probably one of the most knowledgeable, if not the most knowledgeable person that I've ever encountered on YouTube when it comes down to carbon ceramics. I have my limited knowledge with carbon ceramics, like most people, but I go a little further, just like you do, but not as. I mean, this guy, like Micah, is the expert on carbon ceramics.
Oh, well, I'm very flattered, but I definitely am not an engineer for this technology. I do love like getting down. I don't want to ever have a question of why that I can't answer with something that I'm working on. And so I
Okay.
did contact some actual experts and engineers and with many different companies to get various inputs. And that's what I tried to condense into that YouTube video. And I definitely agree. It's a lot more than any technician really knows. But
100.
they should know. And hopefully we can help spread some of this info today.
Right. So I reached out to Micah. I was very adamant about wanting to get him on the podcast and to be really, dive deep at about an hour and a half, maybe, to go into that first video. So again, Micah, we really appreciate you coming on to the podcast, Flat Out Investments, to go ahead and speak about all this, because it's just been, for me, I'm glad that there's there's other people out there that are taking this as serious as most people don't understand they should be taking it.
Right.
And that's really what I appreciate about all the information you put out there. And you actually, you are teaching people, because you taught me something that I didn't know, which
Nice.
I was dumbfounded. I was like, holy shit, I didn't even know about this. So why don't we break this down? We'll start with the first thing that you discovered, which was the outer circular area, which I believe has a specific name to it, that goes
So
on the.
So it's actually, yeah, it's the outer part of the hub that the ceramic rotor bolts to in the middle of the rotor. But it's actually the inner braking surface on a lot of Ferraris, McLarens, and Aston Martins. I noticed that the pad actually overlapped into a center area that is, it's just carbon fiber. It's not carbon ceramic. It's not been hardened. And so you'll see that a lot, especially on, anyone that has 20,000 miles or more. If you look at the front rotors, there'll be a deep groove, and if you're looking at it from the outside, you can see like the typical square pattern of weave getting a little like blurred,
Right.
and that causes like the pads to start to increase their grip and cause noise and actually eat away at the rotor. Yeah, so that was the first thing that I noticed, and then after that, I kind of got into like, oh, what's the you know, what else is going on with these brakes since they're such a new technology, and that led to the understanding of the change of the crystalline structure of the material with heat cycling, which
Right.
often
And
causes the noise.
And I'm glad you brought the heat cycling up, because that's something that me and my profession, you as well, it's something that when we spoke on the phone, it's something that I wanted to bring to the audience and to the 100%. We got to put this out there, because there's three different problems. One of which we would be the first to mention, which is I'm going to say 99.9%, guys. It's every single owner of these supercars, right? That have these carbon ceramic brakes. They have no idea. First of all, they had no idea. They don't even know what fucking heat cycling is, right?
Yeah.
First of all. Second, they've never done a heat cycle on their carbon ceramics. And the biggest problem, third, is that because of those other two that they've never done those two, they have no understanding whatsoever of their capabilities or their performance.
Yeah.
So that's the, and this is, this should be, and I'm glad, again, the video you made is almost, it was like a giant warning flag, and rightfully so. You were talking about how the manufacturers are just completely ignoring this. The number one reason is because, unfortunately, guys, and I've been talking about this my whole fucking life, is that these fucking guys, and I hate to say, these buyers, these owners of these supercars, they don't know how to extract 5% of the engineering that was engineered into these cars, in these chassis and these braking systems.
Yeah, that's totally true. A lot of them don't. It's like a very small percentage that actually drive them, and the ones who do drive them often are ridiculed for like damaging such a classic car and not taking, babying it. But the brake system and the engine, a lot of it really does need to be, it's designed to operate at a very high temperature, very high performance level, and if you don't achieve that, you actually end up having a downside or a negative effect.
Okay, so can we start there?
Sure.
Because that's kind of where I wanted to start with this whole conversation. I'm glad you brought it up. Okay, so first things first, like what you just mentioned, most of these braking systems are not even being brought to not even 30% of their, let's say, heat capacity, right?
Right.
So can you break down, Micah, how is it that because this is something that I started noticing, in again, what I do with my company, AG Supercars, WTS Dynamics, and speaking to the owners, doing forged wheels for these owners, and obviously having to drive the cars myself and racing cars, and having a lot of experience with my advanced driver supercar experience. This was one thing I always noticed especially with rentals, with supercar rentals. You will see this gigantic buildup of basically the pad, right? And the bit of, I'd say like how do you say it, a track that's being developed on the rotor, right? And this buildup is horrible, because this buildup, when you first, let's say, okay, let's just take an example. You have, a guy with a 458, 48. I mean, just put in your mark of supercar, McLaren 720S. Doesn't matter what car it is, a supercar. They've had the car for, let's say, a couple thousand miles, and they've probably never done a brake, let's say a hard brake from 100 plus miles per hour.
Yeah.
Okay. And now you have this issue where the pad is starting to build up on the rotor. And when you try to, especially when you don't have the heat, but if you haven't done heat cycles on these rotors, now you have a bigger problem where you go to do a really hard brake, right, close to ABS
Nothing
level.
happens.
You get no braking almost at all.
Yeah.
Let's go over that, because that's
okay. So just before we get into that, I just want to be very clear. What we talked about at the beginning and that wear pattern with the pads overlapping, this is a separate issue. So just to close that out, if you have that problem, you just need to monitor your rotors and make sure that you change the pads. Eventually, there should be pads made with a notch cut out to avoid that area. That's what the new models have. Ferrari has not gone back and made them for the older models. I'm sure someone eventually will do that, even if it's aftermarket, or Brembo or Pagid themselves make that attempt. So this is now we're moving on to a separate topic, which, like you said,
let's not skip around. You're right. Let's cover that.
I just want to make sure everyone knows, like, that's a separate issue, and don't brake hard if you see the rotor getting worn down. Don't heat cycle that rotor. But yeah, what you're talking about there is that, the brakes are designed to operate at a very high temperature. And the way that brake pads and, are designed is they're supposed to get so hot that they are worn away and they come off of the pad and get burned up. But because people drive slowly and don't engage the brakes nearly to the level that they're designed, they don't end up wearing away. And what you actually get is a calloused, heat-hardened surface on the pad. So the problem is more with the pad than it is with the rotor in this case, because, we heat harden gears, we heat harden items where we apply a non-destructive high heat to that item, and it changes the crystalline structure of the material, making it harder. It does make it also more brittle, but on the case of these rotors, what's happening is it's causing a hardened layer on the pad itself, so it's no longer soft. So when you go to jam those brakes in, you don't have a nice soft material that can convert that motion, that kinetic energy to heat.
Yeah, the braking energy. Right.
Exactly. So now you're just getting this hard, and that's what gives you that nail in the chalkboard squeal. And you bring it into the dealer, and when we had new cars with that squeal, we would just go do 10 hard stops in a row, or drive it in the canyons and just drive it hard and brake hard. Get the brakes where you can smell the brakes, and then drive for a little while at a constant no braking speed of like 50, 60 miles an hour so that it could cool. And now you've taken that hardened layer off and you're back to fresh, soft pad. Now that works with a new pad, a newer car. But once the car gets older, if you do this procedure, you'll notice the noise may go away for a day, and then it'll come right back. Because if you've got a 10-year-old car that's gone through thousands of small heat cycles, these heat hardening cycles, it will cause the entire pad to be hardened. So when you burn away that top layer, it very quickly calluses over again. And in that case, you have to replace the pad. And when you do replace it, you'll notice just an immediate fire grip on that brake. And all my clients tell me after they change the pads, like, whoa, it brakes so much better because the pad is renewed.
What it's supposed to do.
Yeah, but the dealers are advertising like, hey, you have lifetime pads, low dust pads. You don't get dust on your rims. It's like that's because you're not using it correctly. It's actually a bad thing. But I mean, can you blame, like, no one knows how to brake, because when you want to test the limits of the acceleration of your car, you plan it on a road where you got plenty of space and let's floor it and we got bam, bam, gear shift. But if you want to use the brakes to their limit, you have to know exactly how much stopping distance you need. And that takes big skill, because if you brake too much, now you've stopped early and you're accelerating and jerking, trying to get up to the corner. If you obviously underestimate your braking distance, then you're going to be in the woods, with a totaled car. Yeah. So that's why we see supercar drivers, accelerate up, get fast, and then they just they see a corner coming, they start to coast, they dab the brake a little bit, get down to a speed, and then they enter, and then they accelerate hard again. So the brakes never get used, and that's the real reason, I would assume.
Right, and let me ask you, so talking about that, you've had a lot of your clients, like you were mentioning, come in with basically that problem once they've ever gone to the dealer, and the dealer's like, oh, I'm just going to sell you a brand new set of carbon ceramics, like $20,000.
They do that. I mean, they've gotten better about it. They were doing that early on, and, obviously with the rotors, as they age, there are dealers that are recommending new rotors, and it is an upsell. It really is an upsell, but there's ways to know if it's good or not, and you just have to do those tests and properly determine, before. That's what we do before we make a sale. Or even the best thing you should do probably is to convert to a steel or iron rotor for most people, honestly.
I was gonna bring that up, and I'm glad you brought it up as well. There is this argument, there has been since the beginning of carbon ceramics, right? Is it really worth the 20,000 plus? And like what we're talking about with most drivers, but I'm a little bit split down the middle on this, because I know how I drive, right? I've got a couple of my friends and partners that they properly do drive the way you're supposed to drive, and they know what they're doing. They have skill. But for the most part, I am still split between it, because even the amount of grip, like the amount of biting force that a carbon ceramic, even though it hasn't, even talking about what we're talking about, right, where most of these haven't really been put through heat cycles, just that by itself, though, and the diameter of the carbon ceramic, it's kind of hard to, it's kind of hard to to state to someone, hey, you know what, go with a steel braking system. Obviously, if you look at it as a cost point,
Yeah.
then it's a different conversation.
Well, I mean, I have clients that drive their cars very hard, and if you go to the track with carbon ceramics, you can go through an entire pad in one day easily.
Right.
So if you're, and those pads alone are, between $1,000 and $2,000 for just one set. Front pads on like 812 is like, I think like $1,700.
Yeah.
It may even be more than that now. That may be my wholesale cost. But so, if you want to own them and you want to drive them hard, you got to be ready to be biting a lot of money in maintenance. So that's one thing that, it's most people aren't driving that hard. So if you take them off immediately when you get the car, vacuum seal them, because oxidation still happens inside them. You want to suck all the air out and vacuum seal them. Then when you go to resell your car, you have a brand new set on the car that, adds to value. With the steel ones or iron ones, like Giro just makes some incredible race compounds.
I'm glad you mentioned I was going to bring Giro up. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can get good performance. It's not as good as the carbon ceramics. And one thing you will notice is the car won't accelerate quite as fast.
The weight, the weight
Yeah.
you get out of a carbon
The
ceramic.
rotational.
We were sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, you're good. You're good.
I just was going back to a memory. 3 weeks ago, we were at we have a friend of ours that's our main tech for a lot of what we do in our anti-stock team, automotive group. He does a lot of the work for our guys, and we have a good relationship with these very good mechanic. His name's Byron, with Motor Method, and we had Mike, my partner and friend Mike. He's got an R6 Avant. With the carbon ceramics. The ones that we talked about that are the Akimoto, not the Brembo system, which was
right.
Like what the hell is this? But we'll talk about that later. And dude, I have a video. I haven't even posted. That's my biggest problem. I have to just post it. But dude, I picked up, the fucking rotor's bigger than the size of my head, and I picked this fucking thing up. It felt like a dinner plate. I mean, I'm exaggerating. It was like 15 pounds. 15, 18, 20 pounds. That's amazing.
Yeah, you can do it with one hand easily. Grab it with two. Like I can grab it like this with the fingers and easily. Yeah.
So that one, that's a hard, like for me, I'm all about power to weight. I try to explain to a lot of my customers is like they just don't understand going from a forged wheel to or from stock.
Oh yeah.
The difference in power to weight is the rotational mass that you're removing, the unsprung weight.
It helps with everything. It helps with your handling. It helps with like cornering and acceleration and braking. So you're 100% right with that. And I struggle back, but the thing is, like you said, 99.99% of drivers are not even getting that, so it's just a waste. It's just a massive waste for them, and so I wish more people would convert to it. You do need to, if you do decide to do that, monitor your gear and differential oils for wear metals, because it will increase the load on all of your drivetrain components, and you need to probably service it more often to prevent failure or to catch something before it happens. But yeah, I would recommend that. Or another option, which is something I haven't done enough research on, which is there are companies like Rebrake that apparently can recoat rotors, carbon ceramic rotors, and give them a fresh surface for a fraction of the cost of replacing the rotor. But again,
that's something that I think you found out probably when you were doing your research of like, is there even a company that does this?
Yeah, and there's a tool. So something we haven't talked about yet is that, all carbon ceramic rotors up to 2017, the way that you determined if the rotor itself had failed was by removing it, cleaning it, and either weighing it. It has a minimum grams measurement on the rotor, on the hub of the rotor. And or you would micrometer the thickness or do a combination of the two.
And that's amazing because I had no idea about the weight. I knew that you could measure with the laser, which is the tool that most manufacturers.
So that's from 2017 on.
Okay.
So from 2017 on, they went to this new tool that uses like a conductivity test of the rotor.
Okay.
So and that's why all new rotors are marked every 120 degrees with a new number and a minimum viable number, basically. And you align your tool to those three spots on the rotor. and do a measurement. So Rebrake claims that they also are able to be tested in this way and satisfy the returning them back
from the
to
factory. Okay.
But again, I don't know what their process is on that. And when you're changing the structure of an object,
Right.
I don't know how do you undo that without
Right.
replacing it. So
Right, and then a question for you that I wanted to ask you also on the measuring it of the actual carbons of the rotors themselves. Is there a because this is something that I don't think too many people have done, but let's say you have a guy with a GT3 RS or a GT3, you know, track guy. He's going to the track every weekend or at least once a month, right? And he's doing this all year long. Is there on the disc on the rotor itself? Is there a lifespan? Because supposedly it says it'll outgrow the life of the car. Which I don't.
that's not true at all.
That can't be. Yeah.
No, I mean the Ferraris. So the Ferraris have an algorithm that in the instrument cluster it'll tell you when your carbon ceramic is expected to be done. You can look at the material on the carbon on the rotor. It should be a gloss smooth. Once it starts to become like kind of looks like straw or scratches like you can see straw through it or something. That means it's worn, and you'll notice your pad life will start decreasing rapidly because it's no longer that smooth.
Right.
It's like a cheese grater. There's also on like some Porsches they have a little dot. It's a circle that's stamped onto the rotor, and when that is no longer visible as a separate dot, then your rotor's gone. But I mean,
What's the most lifetime that you've seen?
so that's the thing is like because of the oxidation and the heat cycling, we don't know these old rotors, these 20-year-old rotors, if they're good or not internally, because there is no calibration number. You can't put this inductive tool up there and say, oh, this is worn out, because you don't know the from new or the minimum value. So I've seen like a GT3 with 45,000 miles and have the original rotors from 2006, and the guy's driving it and loves it. He's tracking it and loves it. But I don't know the condition of those rotors. I know if you're going to track days, you know, if you put 10,000 miles on a set of rotors and you're really driving, then you're getting to the end of life of that, you know.
Right. But that's impressive because that and I know it's hard to gauge the variables because of the info. It's a brand new product that's only been around for 20 years. And it's I wanted to kind of segue into the first generation of those carbon ceramics, which were on the Mercedes SLR, the Carrera GT, and the Enzo. And I remember, I don't know if you remember the Top Gear when they were testing it out in Top Gear. Remember where Jeremy Clarkson did that braking test? The fucking caliper was on fire, like was literally like it set fire.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to do that, and I was like, what?
Yeah. No.
Like what? No, it's not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
Like it's not supposed to catch fire.
You're supposed to do a cool down lap. You're not supposed to just stop the car and the hottest brakes. But yeah, I mean, they definitely get very, very hot. So a lot of the materials that they like, the paint for the calipers, the boots that for the pistons that slide, you know, all had to be up, you know, improved to handle this high heat that's being generated. But yeah, I mean, again, those cars are not being driven. Carrera GTs, Enzos are not being driven hard for the most part. And those cars are, as soon as the dealer says you got to replace it, majority of the time they're replacing rotors, because those people want to have it up to par so that if they sell at any point, it's a premium. It has all the service records. Right. So it's hard to say.
Have you seen anybody? Actually, this is a really good question because you probably be the best person to ask. What do you think the dealer's doing with those rotors?
I mean, I don't. That's a good question because they don't get changed often. And when I was at Lamborghini, a lot of times what would happen is the techs would just keep, like, they would be throwaways. So the techs would try to keep them and sell them as, hey, early change. These are still good. So I don't know about the other dealers. I don't know what Porsche or these other brands do with them, but I definitely have other techs that have them and sold them still. So it's hard to
That,
say what.
it's kind of crazy. You'd figure that there'd be a serious protocol, but that I think that just shows how relaxed the manufacturers and dealers are taking this. They're just not even. It's not that serious to them. They're just like, whatever, yeah,
Yeah, I
whatever.
mean, I really don't know. That's the thing is like manufacturers don't like owning up to problems. That's one of the things about these cars is that unlike a Toyota or any other mass-produced vehicle, the funny thing about the warranty on these cars is if there is a systemic problem, a lot of times they don't find out until 10 years of the cars come out because they never get driven. And so you very rarely see a recall in the supercar space. Like we saw Lamborghini. I've only known of one recall for Lamborghini where and it wasn't even really, it was a recall, but it was the Aventador evap
Right,
vent,
right.
which would
Yeah,
catch
that
on
was setting on
fire.
fire. I remember. I remember.
Exactly. And then, Porsche has one for the suspension arms on
Very
the
deep.
Carrera GT.
Yeah. Well,
But
but that's again because that's a great. That's actually something else that we should totally talk about. But it's from non-use.
yeah,
It's when the car would sit and then the oil,
yeah,
in the reservoir would just like, hey, you know what? I'm not being used. Fuck this. I'm out.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is it's unfortunate. I mean, the brake system is one that I think is it's a more serious problem because it's obviously
Right.
almost all the cars have them, and
Right.
I just don't know what's going to happen in 2030 when you've got a F430 from 2008 that someone's it's not very valuable at that point possibly, and you're seeing guys get them for cheap and then go track them. Like it's really hard to say, are these carbon ceramics going to still hold up? Are they going to start shattering?
Right.
And there definitely needs to be some kind of input because that sadly what I think will happen is you'll start seeing them shatter, and then the
Well, that
manufacturer will say, "Oh, there's a problem."
right. And because we haven't on record, there hasn't been one that's ever shattered. Right.
I mean, I don't know of any that have under normal use shattered, other
Yeah.
than I've seen ones that were cracked because of like a user install error or an accident, and someone tried to continue driving on it after it was repaired, but I haven't seen one just explode from use.
Right. And I think like what you just said, because that was something that I know I've never heard of it. And I mean, I've got a lot of different
Hmm.
apps that are feeding me information
Yeah,
in the automotive world. So I've never heard. I mean, I think we definitely would have heard of it. I think if it would have ever happened, we would
yeah.
definitely.
Let me
But
see if let me see if there's something that just pops up in the news.
okay, that'd be funny if there's one like, oh yeah, Enzo crash from shattering of. No, I think we would have heard of it.
Yeah.
But so while you're looking for that, so Micah, you've been. I mean, you're almost an extension right now at this point as an educational platform, which is one of the things because I see the cars in the background. Obviously, you're working a lot on Ferrari. Ferrari is right now your main
The
like
majority.
okay,
Yeah, the majority of what I'm doing is Ferrari. I do have a Aston V12 Vantage S outside that I just did a clutch on.
sick,
So I'm getting more into the Aston. I mean, I've been doing Astons, but I'm trying to get more of that market in. I just got the Aston Martin diagnostic software, so I was using like aftermarket scanners for that before, but and then a lot of Lamborghini, just because I worked with them. I worked at that dealer, and then now the McLarens have become so problematic that I'm getting a lot of people who are like watching my videos saying, "Hey, there's a problem with McLaren engines. There's a
right,
problem with the McLaren suspension accumulators." So like, I came up with a tool to be able to do that. Now I'm one of the only. I think I'm the only shop in California aside from the dealer that can do the 720 and the 600 LT accumulators. Um,
what's going? I wasn't aware of this. What's going on with? Tell me about that. What's going on with the
so
accumulator?
an accumulator is I just did one for a 720, but all an accumulator is a ball of metal that inside has a rubber diaphragm and
Hmm.
it's filled with nitrogen. to a certain pressure, and it acts as like a battery for hydraulic pressure. So you have an electric pump that builds up pressure in the system, and if you were to have no accumulator, fluid is virtually uncompressible, right? That's a rule of fluids, right? So you would have to have the pump running constantly to be supplying varying pressures or use of this hydraulic fluid. So you have an accumulator, which the air is compressible, so it compresses all that air in the accumulator as the pump runs, and that kind of stores as you use the fluid to do things like actuate things, and the pressure would drop. The fluid actually comes out of that ball, and the gas pressure maintains a system pressure. So this is just a battery. It's very common. It's been used for 30, 40 years in cars. Bentley Turbo R back in the 90s had them for both the suspension and the braking system. So the way that McLaren uses them is each wheel has its own accumulator, or each shock has its own accumulator that acts kind of as like a gas spring and reservoir for changing, adapting the suspension to various types of bumps. Okay, so in those
electromagnetic suspensions that's in the the Cadillac with the V and the Corvettes, the Z06s.
Right. Well, this system is actually made by Tenneco, and it's also in the Rivian trucks, actually. And so Rivians have the exact, almost identical shocks and a very similar system. So what happens over time, though, is this fluid is CHF11S is kind of a caustic fluid. So eventually it deteriorates the rubber. The rubber is expanding and contracting, and then it fails. And then it means that shock no longer has a shock battery there, like a hydraulic battery. It just becomes, it releases its gas into the system, and then you'll hear the pump going constantly. And that shock side, you also see the car's height kind of bouncing in like a very small amount. You have to look very closely. It's like a 1/16 of an inch. It'll go up and down as the pump goes up and down. Wow. So I removed those. And then you have to get all the air out of the system because, like I said, air compresses, right? So you don't want air in the lines. Otherwise, when the pump builds up pressure, it'll compress the air instead of pushing the fluid to do its hydraulic job.
Right.
So you have to evacuate all the fluid out, draw a vacuum on the system, and then fill it, vacuum fill style, so it's no air in the system after you've replaced the accumulators, and then you have to also pressurize it to a minimum operating pressure. Once the car sees it, then it realizes, okay, the car is safe to operate again. So there's a special tool that McLaren uses for like 10 grand. It's stupid. If you know how a hydraulic system works, I built one for like $500-600 of material, and now I'm able to do those.
Of course, the McLaren branded one is $10,000.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and they tell you don't mess with it without that tool, but I replace them often.
So let me ask you, so is this something recent? Because I wasn't even aware of this, the actuator.
The accumulators?
Yeah,
they fail about every 4 years. It's a service item. Even in the McLaren extended warranty that you get, it does not cover the accumulators as a service item.
Because they know that they fail.
Yeah, they're going to fail. It seems to be every 4 years. So, and they just consider it a service.
Let's say if you're driving, I don't know, above 50 miles per hour, is this something you're going to feel that almost like the shock is starting to lose its ability to work the way it was engineered?
Well, you definitely feel a more firm bump on those shocks where it has no gas expansion.
Okay.
And then you also may notice like it has a active body roll system. So basically the compression side of the shocks on the driver's side are linked to the rebound side of the shocks on the passenger side, so that as you turn the car, let's say that you're turning hard right and the car starts to lean left, that pushes fluid down on the left side, and then it goes over to the other side and pushes that shock down, so it keeps the car flat. Yeah, exactly. So you may notice that stops to work and you don't have as much, you're not able to hold as much G-force in a corner as a result of that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's not that bad of a failure. It's not something like the Carrera, let's say, in comparison to the Carrera GT.
Brake failure.
Yeah, exactly. Like
or the ball joints, exactly. It's not going to just cause the car to wreck.
Exactly. Yeah, like we all know, the famous Carrera GT that killed, what's his name?
Yeah, Paul Walker.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we could have that conversation. That'd be a great conversation to have as a second podcast. I'd love to talk to you about that because that's That's
Yeah.
I can't even fucking believe, just as a small thing I want to say, I cannot fucking believe that his daughter sued Porsche and that Porsche paid. That's ludicrous.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was because of like the flippancy that they were, handling the whole situation with. I think they caught internal documents between people saying, who cares? It just means there'll be less of them, more valuable, and less problems we have to deal with. So that's what I think is like, that's just kind of a gross thing to do, and people are potentially dying from that. But I think that whole I've heard rumors that the tires were the original tires, and there's
Original
so
tires and the
much.
shock. What we were just talking about, the
Yeah,
shock. The car wasn't used. So those two
yeah.
combinations right there, man, that'd be enough to, Rojas was not Mr. fucking badass race car driver. He was Mr. I have the money to go racing race car driver. You know?
Yeah,
No,
they
no
want.
offense to him or the family, but I'm sorry. Like Rojas did not have some absolutely amazing racing history. Where we could go, well, look, he was a really amazing driver, and he did
Yeah.
everything.
Well, I mean, even if he was, we just don't know what happened. I mean, I've had
Right.
moments where I've never, thank God, just wrecked a vehicle, so a
Right.
client's vehicle. But I've definitely had moments where we have to test the vehicle to its limits sometimes to make sure that we've resolved issues, or God forbid, that there's a further problem that we're not seeing. You don't want the client to be the one to find that out. So I've
Right.
definitely had moments where I was pushing a vehicle and a little bump in the road causes weight transfer that you weren't expecting, and I've been very blessed not to have put it into a wall before, but I know that it's sheerly by luck
Very fast.
that so
It
it could
happens very
happen
fast.
to anyone.
Yeah.
But that car is notorious for being extremely analog, so no assistance, and you got to know what you're doing, and it's a lot of weight in the rear of the car. Once you get it going,
Extremely snappy.
you
It's a
can't
very snappy car.
recover it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. People. I've talked to several people. I've never driven one, but I've watched like every video out there, and you could just tell. I mean, it's a fucking race car. I mean, it was a
Yeah.
race. It was a car that it was literally Porsche going, "Hey, look, we didn't go racing at Le Mans. We didn't catch it in time. So let's just make it into a street car."
Yeah.
Granted, they did a fantastic job. It's the ultimate raw. It's. I love to call it that line of when supercars literally started getting into the hypercar level of
Right.
of a category.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the hypercar category was so amazing that we have. It spawned from that era, the early 2000s. So
Right.
basically, the manufacturers started mass producing supercars,
Yeah.
and so then there became this new market of ultra wealthy. They're like, "Dude, I don't want something that everyone has." And it's started that Carrera GT, the Chiron, the I think that's what brought McLaren um, back onto the scene.
It did.
But
Yeah. And not to mention, not let's not forget. We have to mention the '90s. We had the CLK GTR Roadster and the CLK GTR,
yeah,
the GT1. Um,
yeah,
what am I missing? The GT1, the CLK. Oh, and the McLaren F1 technically
yeah.
was in that category as
Well,
well.
yeah, it definitely wasn't priced as high, I don't think, as those other. And I think the Bugatti EB130, I think, was probably another kind of like hypercar. But
The EB110
110,
is.
yeah, you don't think so?
Have you ever been in one? Have you ever
I mean,
driven in one?
I've not driven one. I've been in one, but
Okay.
I've never driven one. But I mean, it's very reminiscent of like 90s
Sure.
rear
It's
engine.
really, it's not, I don't know how to explain this. It's cool because of how rare it was, and it was Bugatti trying to kind of get into that, like, hey, you know what? We should come back.
Yeah,
Let's start making some supercars. But it's nowhere. Let me see. I'm trying to compare it with, because I've driven in one. I haven't driven one, but I've driven in one. It's almost. So it's like an F40 that is a little bit better, if that makes any sense. It's a little
yeah,
bit better than the F40, and that doesn't say too much because the F40, as amazing as that car is,
yeah. It's just very, very
very raw. It's a
carnal.
very raw.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so actually mentioning the F40, something I wanted to talk to you about as well. I wanted to ask you a question. So you doing these braking systems, has anybody come to you with an F40 saying, "Hey, you know what? I'd love to retrofit a carbon ceramic, a current carbon ceramic brake system to an F40. Would you do that?
Yeah, I had someone ask to do it on a GTO actually, a '69
Okay.
GTO. So it's an older vehicle,
Yeah.
and that would be really cool. It'd be we ended up not going with it because of the cost, in the end.
Okay.
But there are guys like Ring Bros. I don't know if you're familiar with Ring
Yeah, yeah, I
Bros.
know the Ring Brothers.
So
Yeah, yeah, of
yeah, they're
course.
doing carbon ceramic like adaptations for older vehicles. So yeah, I mean, I think that's cool. If you've got the money and you want, if you like, I have some clients that are pinnacle drivers, and
Right.
they drive 10 all the time. It's dangerous. But they love it, and they have the money for it. If you've got the money for it and you want to do it,
Yeah.
I think it's cool. Go right ahead.
Right.
Because you definitely, like I
Well,
said, that
there's also the option of the because a lot of people always, again, I mean, and you'll know this as well. So I have a friend of mine. His name is Brian. He's got two 4GTs. He's actually known in the whole 4GT world because what he did was he retrofitted a ZR1, the C6 ZR1 system, to 4GT.
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's really sick. I mean, the guy's an engineer, so he really knew what he's doing. But it
Right.
doesn't take that much. It's a couple of brackets,
Well,
and obviously you update the booster. I mean, you
yeah,
gotta do
exactly. You got to do the whole. You make sure the system is set for it. That's one thing that on that GTO, the reason I was brought on to do engine and transmission, bring a modern drivetrain into it. But when he came in, someone had added big brake calipers in the front and big rotors, and the
let the
brake
booster.
master couldn't push it, and it was only braking with the rear wheels. Like the front rotors had the cross, like it was brand new from the factory, and the rear rotors are worn down. And I was like, bro,
Right. What the hell's going on here?
you gotta die in this car. No traction control, and you're using rear braking. I don't know.
What the fuck?
Yeah, so we ended up
That's insane.
having to upgrade all of that. We went to a hydraulic, which also uses an accumulator. Power
Right.
steering pump powers an accumulator that then applies the brake pressure for it. So, and it stops now. It's an incredible system.
Right. It's not this guy that did the K24 swap on the white 308, is it?
No, this is the car was actually
is
owned by
308.
Dane Cook. Dane Cook, the comedian, is the one who
Comedian?
did. Yeah, he's the one who did the conversion. If you go on his page, you'll see an old black GTO that he
I didn't
had.
even know it was the cars.
Yeah, he had I think 3 or 4 cars that were sold there together through a broker that I knew. An NBA player bought this one, and
Okay.
I don't know where the other ones went. But then it came over here, and it was just nothing on
It
the
was a mess.
car had been done correctly, and that's what people
Yeah.
don't. People think, oh, I'm just gonna buy these Willwoods and throw them on, or we're just gonna throw on this or that. And unfortunately, the reason custom costs so much is you need a master level engineer to make these things work properly, because you see these kits online, you think, oh, I'll just buy it, slap it on, but the suspension was messed up, the control arms didn't work, the pinion was pointed downward, so the car would like shake under load because the gearbox and the pinion are both, for the diff, are pointed downward, and you can't make a drive shaft like
Right.
in a U shape, and
Right.
so everything about it was messed up. We had to redo literally every aspect of the car, and that costs a lot of money.
course.
You have to have someone who's an expert, and I'm not an expert, and I had to reach out to people, do a bunch of research, and even then, after driving it, I told them I had to keep the car to do a break-in because I wanted to see, like, okay, well, where are we going to have problems, and fix those. So
So does he still have the car?
yeah, he's still. I mean, the car's actually here right now. He's injured, so
Oh shit.
once he comes off of injury, he'll come and drive it for the first time himself. But the player, he's a younger guy. He's never. He can't drive a manual. That was one of the things he wanted to do. He wanted to convert it to an automatic, so we put the 6L80E in it, and it's we did sport shift and everything, so you can still like use the shifter to bump it up and down, and it's a very modern drivetrain. But there's still no ABS, no traction control. Now he's got
Right.
400 horsepower, in a.
Someone needs to teach him how to drive.
Well, that's exactly what when he finishes, when he comes back off of injury, season ends. I have a company out here called Fast Sideways. Nick Romano is the owner, and he's an instructor. So we'll go to
Okay.
Willow Springs with it and go out on the balcony first and just like get him to lose traction a lot and see what that feels like and what threshold he has to cross to get to that. And then Nick will take him on Streets of Willow and give him some real good instruction on like how to recover, how to hold it.
Right.
But yeah, very important.
That's very cool. Yeah, that's again, that's what we, I've been doing that for a while now with my at SC, and it's I wish, I know Lamborghini, Porsche, BMW, they all have their driving, absolutely amazing driving. Ferrari too, with of course a Pilati, but that's the problem with it, man. It's like, see, these guys are not, a lot of them. I'm not saying all, right? There's some really hardcore, passionate drivers that have the ability to purchase all these cars, right?
Right.
To have all the money in the world. But the problem is that you just have a lot of these fucking guys that are just, they're buying the cars just to say they have the car, right?
Yeah.
And if they do Corsa Pilati, they're being trained by ex-Formula One drivers. You really think they're retaining anything? Maybe like 3%, maybe.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to go to. I definitely went to one of those Porsche driving events once, and the instructor that was teaching me asked if I had track experience. And I'm like, yeah, I have street bikes. I have an S1000RR and a Ducati A48 that I track often, and so I have a lot of track experience, but not in the Porsches. So he kind of rolled his eyes, and we went through the road course, and he was actually starting to push me more and like, okay, don't lift it all through this up over hill section, and then once you get over it, in a straight line, apply all your braking, and I'll tell you when to turn in. So I started to do those things, and by the end of it, he's like, man, you're a great driver. This is awesome. I thought you were just kidding, like that you went to track. I hear it all the time, and you see people can't drive. So he really started teaching me, but you could tell his job as an instructor was a babysitter. It wasn't an instructor. It was a no, you shouldn't turn the traction off, and basically making sure people weren't braking hard mid-corner, which is what I see a lot. It's scary when you go on these car events and you see guys race into a corner and misjudge it and then panic and brake hard, like stab the brake in the corner. And a little tip, if you want to know if someone can drive or not and they have a carbon ceramic car, just go look at the rear rotors. And if they're all pitted out, but the front rotors look brand new, that means the car is actively applying those rear brakes a lot to try to keep the car from wrecking. And it's an easy tell, and no one's talking about, but go to any car meeting, just all the ones that have...
Again, another point you made that I was like, I hope you bring it up, because I was going to bring it up, but you read my mind on that one. That's awesome. I'm going to go out and actually just do an event where it'll be all supercars, and that's literally, I'm going to check every single car and go, okay, how many? I guarantee it'll be every single car.
The majority, yeah. Yeah, I went out riding with one of my clients. He has a couple of supercars, and the great thing about being trusted, I'm very grateful that, I have the clientele that I do, but the great thing about them are they love to have me come and go. And if they have extra cars, they'll be like, hey, we're going here, just take one of my other cars. And so we went and ripped up a canyon, and I was following along, and this driver was outpacing me. By the time we got to the end, he was a little bit out of sight, just beyond the next corner. And why I was having such a hard time is there were so many dips, and we were driving in the evening, and the headlights would show where the road would just kind of drop off. You'd see a dip, and it's in a corner, and I like to see apex accelerate through, but when you see a dip like that, you don't want to be accelerating when the weight comes off. So I was constantly like, whoa, and I drive with traction off all the time because I just don't like
only way to do it
not having the input. When is the car going to stop? Interrupt your power. So we got to the end of it, and I was like, man, you could really rip this road. You must really know it well. He goes, traction control does it for me. And I was like, oh, traction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What car was it?
He was driving a McLaren. I was driving an SLS AMG. The Goldwing.
Okay. That's a Black Series, or was it a?
No, it was just a regular Goldwing. Yeah, it's a great car.
That's a fucking. I love, dude. When Mercedes brought that car out, and they had that really amazing commercial with Schumacher, and I was like, oh my god, finally they brought the ultimate, Goldwing. They brought it back. And then they replaced it with that fucking GT, dude.
Yeah.
It's not even Goldwing. I'm like, dude, why? But I understand. I think that I think. I mean, you tell me your opinion. I think it was. I think they wanted to make the SLS a little more rare, just like they wanted to do the original Going. And they
Yeah.
decided if we continue down this line, we're really going to start cutting our clientele short because we're going to start producing over 3,000 plus cars.
Yeah.
That's, so I think it had to do with
Well,
production.
I think, again, the early 2000s is where we saw Audi bought Lamborghini, did the Gallardo, said, hey, there's a market for mass-produced cars. Let's start mass-producing them. And then Aston followed suit. They had their highest sales in the history of their company in 2008 up until this new SUV came out, which has beat that record now. But the at that time, BMW came out with the Z8, and there was a lot of the retro looks. I think the PT Cruiser kind of and the Plymouth Prowler kind of got the wheels turning, and then the Ford Mustang was the one was like, oh wow, this like retro design actually works. And then BMW did the Z8, but the demand for the Z8 was very low. They didn't sell, and the price dropped after they came out. So I think the SLS was like Mercedes' version of like, oh damn, we need to do some retro revival. They took a little longer to come to market, and I think that they kind of had a similar, like they came out with that car right after the financial crash, right?
It was 20, yeah, so 2012, 13, I think was the first generation.
I want to say it was earlier than that. I want to say it was like 2011,
11?
2010,
11, yeah,
because
11. Yeah.
I had the same gearbox that California had in it, and it had the same as the modern it's the first one Mercedes to have a DCT.
Oh, wait a minute. We got to cover that because I have one of my anti-stock team members. His name's Ani. We were talking about this, and I'm like, nah, get the fuck out of here. Like the Ferrari California transmission was not the same one in the SLA. He's like, no, dude, it is. I'm like,
Yeah.
Wait a minute. So we did a little bit. You tell me what you know on this, but we did a little bit. I did a little research. So this is what it comes down to: the casing is the same. The internals were a little different, obviously, but it is technically the same. I believe it's a ZF, right? It's a ZF.
It's Getrag 7 DCL 750. Yeah.
Right.
So it the gear ratio is different on the California and the SLS, but they both lack the electronic differential control that the later versions of this gearbox, like this Ferrari and this is an FF, this is a GTC4 Lusso, they both have the same gearbox, the 7 DCL 750, and they have an electronically controlled differential, which was like a huge step up.
Insane.
Yeah, instant variable control of differential lockup, which is an incredible electronic use of electronics. But yeah, they're basically like the shift panel inside is identical. I think the way the clutch is balanced is a little different. I think the Ferrari uses like a lube flow. I haven't taken apart an SLS AMG transmission. I have taken apart an AMG GT, and the only difference in the operation is the clutch basket doesn't have the lube flow solenoids that apply a balancing flow to the basket. It's kind of complicated. It doesn't really matter, but they're virtually the same thing. Yeah.
And the GT also has that system that which is I really haven't dove into that, but it's got the hybrid electronic. It's basically a system that helps the transmission shift a little bit. It's kind of an in between where they put the system between the transmission and the engine, so it's not providing power to the engine electronically, but it's giving it like an electronic boost to the transmission.
New AMG GT, you're saying, has an electric assist?
Yeah. Yeah, you can even see it powering up on the display. It'll show you when it's
okay.
When it's
Oh yeah, I have noticed that before. Actually, yeah, you're right. I never give it much. I really don't drive much of the AMG GTs. I've done some work. I did one for SEMA a few years ago. The first GTR, which it has nothing on the drive. It does not have it. It does. I'm pretty sure it does not have it because I took the whole torque tube and everything out for that. But
so maybe it's a 63 because my partner Mike, he's got an AMG GT 63. Right?
That is different. That's a different gearbox and everything.
Okay, then that's what it is. Then that's what I'm thinking about. Not so the GT. I guess they might have probably not put it in there just because there was more weight.
I mean, that's really where that's where I think the hybrid should be focused more on supercars is supercapacitor that's charged up under braking force and then unleashes instant acceleration to the drivetrain under your reapplication of throttle, because you're constantly, every single corner is brake, accelerate. So
I totally agree. The only hybrid system that I was okay with, as far as I remember when Chris Harris was first driving the P1
Hmm.
and the 918
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
LaFerrari came out.
exactly. Those cars are just incredible.
That
I look forward to getting one of those three in the shop, and thankfully we're making some big changes at Hollywood Mechanic, some new staff, and so
right.
we have someone dedicated to one of those brands. It's already handling one of those three hybrids. So hopefully it won't be long. We'll have one of those in here and
Awesome.
make some content around it. Yeah.
And Micah, so let me ask you, because this is something I think that, who knows, maybe that this could be a really great way to attract some new customers. Not
Hmm.
that you need help with that, but I think it'd be really cool because this is something I've always wanted to do is that conversation. We should totally have maybe another podcast on retrofitting carbon ceramics, the ZR1 system, if anything, 'cause it's not that expensive. You can get one for like 10K.
Hmm.
Uh, on eBay if you find one at a junkyard at like a supercar. There's Corvette junkyards, obviously.
Yeah.
Have a couple ZR1s because you know how those things are. People can't drive the shit out of them.
Yeah. I mean,
Um, and it'd be cool to retrofit a carbon ceramic to the F40, even the F50, because I don't know if you know this. I've had a couple of friends of mine and customers that had F40s, right?
hmm.
First thing you do when you buy an F40, you literally grab the braking system. They go just like throw it in the garbage,
Oh, really?
and they get the F50 braking system because it is
Hmm.
an upgrade.
Hmm.
Even though, as far as diameter wise, it wasn't that much bigger, and the rotor was a little bit bigger, but the caliper was almost the same. But if you drive an F40 and an F50, dude, the braking system on an F40, it's. I mean, I've never been scared in a car, and it's like, what the fuck is going on?
That's
You
how
you, you
bad it
apply the
is, huh?
brake. What's that? Yeah, it's that bad. You apply the brakes. You have no feel whatsoever,
Mm.
absolutely no feeling whatsoever, and it feels like you're pressing a block of wood.
Mm.
There's nothing there, and they really don't do a good job.
Yeah. Insane. Well, I mean, I'd definitely be open to doing something like that. That shouldn't be that difficult of an exchange, but it would definitely require. I don't want to do any more. I'm not doing any more repair or rebuild or upgrades on vehicles until I have, you have to have the right client for that because
Right.
you have rabbit hole after rabbit hole of unexpected consequences for doing little things, and clients like that usually are like, "Yeah, I want this done in a month," and
Yeah.
sometimes you've got to like you know do quite a bit of R&D. It could take a year to get a
Yes.
system working properly. And most of that time is waiting for stuff to come in. Then you try it, and it's like, oh, well, we didn't see that come in, so now we got to adjust. Um, but yeah, I would love to do something like that. If you have a client that wants to do it, uh, I have done a full rebuild kit. I have the only commercially available rebuild kit for that DCT gearbox we were talking about earlier. I
Okay.
have a repair kit for the Ferrari PTU. I have a
Okay.
other products for Rolls-Royce. I'm working on a McLaren engine kit now because McLaren engines fail and they don't provide any replacement parts internally, no valves, no springs, stuff like that. So we have finished the valve train and we're working on pistons now. And um,
Wow.
but I
That's
definitely take
amazing.
things to the next level as far as like looking at them from an engineering standpoint and seeing like where the problem lies and how to best resolve it or improve it. So I would love to do something like that, but it would have to be definitely have to be the right client, someone who's willing to, you know, look at the right wheels that are going to fit the best performance and look best for the car, and you know, because you can't just say, hey, I want to run 20s on this now because it's cool. Like that may not be what's best for the car.
Been dealing with that for years with
Yeah.
WTF Dynamics. Trust me,
Hmm.
I'm constantly having to do what you do, educate these guys, and the problem is that a lot of them get insulted. They think that you're trying to make them feel stupid. It's like, no, I'm just trying to educate you on something you unfortunately have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
you do it in a respectful manner, but these guys are, you know how they are, man. They're up in the air.
Yeah, dude. I had a client he came in. He's like, I got beat by a Tesla. I want to beat a Tesla in my '60s model of car, and I was like, okay, well,
Yeah,
this
it's a
okay,
hard
but
fucking
it's going to be like 60, $70,000, and
time.
you're driving a manual gearbox, so you're just not going to beat it. But we can get close, especially at high speed.
Yeah.
And we started a project that, you know, 1,500 horsepower block and nitrous system, and then once he started
What car?
seeing, I don't want to say because the client is, we're completing it
Okay.
because the client just midway through it said, you know what, I just want to go back to what I had before. It's fine. Don't even mess with it. And I was like, dude, you are way beyond that. We,
Oh man.
you've paid for parts that cannot be returned, and you signed for that. You agreed to that,
Yeah.
and those are here now. And now we're storing your car for 6 months because you don't want to move forward. And you're telling me I never wanted. I don't even want this. Let's just turn it around. And it came to like screaming, and not me screaming and
What?
yelling. I have it all. I record all my phone calls, but him
Right.
calling me saying I can never work with you again. You're taking advantage of me, and I'm like, you
It's like,
signed
no,
it.
you're taking advantage of me and my time. What are you
Yeah,
talking about?
I'm
Get the way
storing your
around.
vehicle here, and he's got people making threats, and so it just was insane. Thankfully,
Dude, that's crazy, man.
yeah, it happens. It happens often. It's shocking how bad my judge of character is, I guess, because I think, oh, this guy's awesome. He's just like me. He
No,
wants
no,
to
no,
do
no.
cool stuff, and then 6 months later, they flip out over something that you had nothing to do with. And
It's not your judge of character. It's the fucking people. They're pieces of
yeah,
shit. A
I mean,
lot
it
of them
can
can be.
be. Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
So thankfully, if you just are calm and act with reason and say, hey, again, I've got signed paperwork and here's your recorded phone call of you requesting these things. And look, I just want to, since you've had me as your mechanic, you've gone through 4 personal assistants, and I'm the only person in your life that's consistent. I know you value my work. So what's going on here? How do we need to
Yeah.
get back on the same page? And thankfully we did. And
That's
this,
good. I mean, I'm glad to hear that because that can be, I mean, a nightmare. It sounds
yeah.
like you wouldn't be dealing with any of that. So I mean, I haven't been far down that line, but I have been in a very similar situation where it's these guys, they just have all this money that they just think, oh yeah, I'll just go back to whatever.
Yeah.
Just
No,
where
I
it
mean,
came
when
from.
you have that much money and you're surrounded by people who are just saying yes to you all the time, you hear it all the time, yes men, and it's the truth. But more than that is they just don't understand. They think, I can throw money at a problem when I don't get the result that I want. Then I can just withhold money and make threats, and this person
Yeah.
needs me, and it's like, I
No.
don't need you. I have plenty of work,
Exactly.
and so now that you want to throw this tantrum, that's fine. But we're going to sit on the car. Now you're getting storage in the vehicle. A lien process will begin, and
Right.
I will own your car, or you will pay me. And I didn't
Exactly.
do
There you
either.
go.
I threatened
That's
to
how you
put a
do
lien at one point. I was like, "Hey, man, look, just so you know, I've been storing your car for 6 months inside, climate controlled, covered up. It takes a lot of work to do that and to maintain it, and I'm paying insurance that covers that. So,
it.
you know, but I
I'm
lost."
sure the guy's never heard of a mechanic's lien in his life, man.
Oh, I mean, he has attorneys. But he's also notorious for suing people. He's right now suing a podcaster for talking badly about him, and
What?
he sued him 4 times and lost the first 3 times. This fourth time, now he's got a judgment against the podcaster. So now the podcaster is suddenly dealing with this nightmare. So I just don't want to be going through that, and it's just
Well, we're not going to mention names or anything.
no, of
And
course.
that's not an issue. But I'm glad you guys are working stuff out, and he seems like a really great guy. Anyways, but so yeah, man. So because we got a little off track, so I wanted to go back to 2 points on the what we first talked about, right? So the two tools obviously are the weight, and then that laser tool. Do you know? I think you purchased one, right?
No, I
Micah,
came. I came and used one at a facility that had them. I have not purchased one. It's about
Porsche. It
seven
was a
thousand
Porsche
dollars.
dealership. That's
Uh,
right.
Again, and I'm not supposed to say which dealership,
Okay,
but
sorry, sorry.
it's okay. But yeah, I went to a dealer that had one and observed them using it, and that's part of that video I made on carbon ceramics. I think it
Yeah.
had degraded like 30% of the range, the from new to the minimum acceptable, and it was only 2 years old and had like 5,000 miles. Now I don't know if the failure of that is linear or if it just drops off a lot at first and then slows its decline. So I don't want to take that as, don't read into that too much, but yeah, I did use that tool, and it apparently measures the conductive properties of the rotor. And so once it starts seeing a different conductivity of the rotor, it means that the material has now changed in form to something that is not as strong and not okay to use.
Right.
Or that's
And I
what they
mean,
say.
as we all know, with engineering, with anything that's in, especially a braking system, high performance braking system like carbon ceramic, I'm pretty sure. Obviously, the minimum is where like, okay, you have to change the braking system, fine, but there's always a pretty big gap, right? That
After from failure to minimum, you're saying?
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean
like
that like any like jack that you use for a car, right? If it's rated for 4 tons, it has to undergo testing where it can withstand, I think 30% more before it fails. Or
correct,
some, it depends on the equipment. Some of them, like a lift, I think have to fail like almost double what the rating is to be
right.
able to provide that. So yeah, I'm sure that you can continue using them for a while. I don't
Yeah,
know
you would
where that
want to.
is.
I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying that, it's not like I don't want people to think like I don't want some of these owners to go like, oh my god, and freak the fuck out and go, holy shit, my carbon ceramic is gonna explode. No, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Again, like you said, they haven't been failing. I just would, if you're buying an old car, if you're buying a 20-year-old car that
right,
has never had rotors and pads done, I would just seriously consider switching over to steel or iron rotors and putting the other ones on the shelf just because we don't know and you're taking
right,
a risk on being the first one, you know?
right. And going back to the first carbon ceramics we were talking about, the
hmm
SLR, the Carrera GT, the Enzo. Do you know, because they're all the same system? Do you know? Have you had any customers with those systems? Have you got been able to inspect those to see the differences, between the years?
I have looked at a LaFerrari and an SLR,
Okay.
but we were not really. I just looked at the brakes. Both of them were super low miles. Both of them looked like they were brand new rotors.
Right.
So it was not like, I think the LaFerrari did have that like that wear where the pad is overlapping on that center rotor, so it was grinding a little groove there. Which again is just, to me, it blows my mind that hasn't been recalled and there's no new pad
Right.
for that. It's just that it just blows my mind. Um, but other than that, yeah, it didn't look like there's not enough wear on the rotor to be able to judge
Right.
what the long term performance will be.
And the question is on the LaFerrari, what I'd love to, and I know that it's a different braking system. It's even, I think it's, I don't know how many millimeters bigger, but I know that the FXX and the FXXK
I
are
think
going to be
those, yeah, I think those cars use a more carbon based
full carbon almost.
blend.
Yeah.
I don't know 100%, but I would imagine because they're track only cars that come with support teams and stuff like that, they're carbon, and you get a much better braking at higher temperatures. No one's driving an FFX or
No.
FXXK to the mall or to a club, so you know,
Right.
I think they use
But
a
that
different.
okay. There was something that we talked at the beginning of the podcast, which was right before we started. Obviously, you wanted to get my take on shops here in Miami,
Yeah,
obviously,
exactly. Yeah.
and because this is something you in LA. I mean, you're right now one of the guys that's up and coming. I mean, I don't want to mention any names, but the only other person I think of when you think of LA in the modding world, and I don't think that's really exactly what that's not really your specialty, even though you are doing some really amazing modifications, more for maintenance items.
hmm
You have Gentani, which I mean,
hmm
I respect him. I see a lot of his stuff. I just saw a video that they just did this F1 system for the GT3 RS, the 992 GT3 RS.
hmm
I mean, the exhaust systems the guy's making is, I mean, what he's doing is, I think the guy's a badass, straight up. I think he's. Do you know him by any chance? Have you had
Uh,
any run-ins with him at all?
I've
Or
worked on cars that he's tuned and messed with before, for sure.
okay,
Um,
okay,
I have some clients that have gone to him, so, but I don't have any opinion.
it doesn't sound like it's very positive. I mean,
I mean, I've never had to interact with him myself,
okay,
but I have had
some of his clients, like
some
you
of his
mentioned.
clients come with some issues. I don't know if it's related necessarily, but it definitely had some very poor conditions in some of the cars. I don't again know if it's related to him. One of the cars he tuned, a Ferrari FF, immediately sprung leaks in the gearbox, and that happens oftentimes when you raise the red line on the car because
The
the car
transmission.
is not designed. The transmission specifically is not designed to go over 8,000 RPM or 8,500. So I've noticed a lot of cars that have this weep hole leak are coming right after being tuned, and they're revving them to like 9,500
Yeah,
RPM. So, but I mean, I don't think that you can look at Gentani and be like, "Oh, you're an idiot because you did this." Like, we raise rev limiters and we remove safety protocols a lot of times for cars because owners just want, they're like, we don't care if it shortens the life. And so oftentimes it comes with consequences. But I don't know enough about him specifically and his work to be able to have a positive or negative,
Okay.
saying on it. So I don't want to
That's
say that.
interesting. That's interesting that you did have that Ferrari FF. I mean, I'm pretty sure it always depends on also the driver. Was he really revving the living shit out
I
of
mean,
it?
that everyone who tunes it to do that is doing that. They're
That's
putting
what that,
pipes on, they're wanting to shoot flames, they want to sound
sure.
badass. So, they do that. But I mean, like again, I don't know enough about Gintani. It's himself to. One of my employees actually worked for him as a welder and a fabricator. Um,
Okay.
and
Cool.
so he's excellent. And he was the one helping make the systems, and he has done extremely good work. So I would imagine if Gintani is doing work to that level, then it's great work.
Good stuff. Right.
The only cars I see from him are the ones that have problems afterwards. So obviously it's going to look like he's messing up cars. But again, like with that
Right.
Ferrari, he didn't touch the transmission. He just tuned
Right.
a higher red line, and so a downstream effect was a leak that we could have fixed.
No, and I think it's expected. I mean, especially again, I really do think it has a lot to do with how you're going to drive the car.
Yeah.
Most of anybody, including myself, I think you, when we go drive a car, whether it's fully modded or it's stock, we know the limits,
Yeah.
right? And you can go to the limit, but it's how many times you can go to that limit,
Yeah, and also how you do it. Turbo cars, you need to warm up the turbos. You need
Right.
to cool them down before you just turn the car off. You can't just
Everybody
go
forgot about
rip.
turbo time.
Yeah, I know, dude.
What happened to turbo timers,
Dude,
man?
that
They
was
blew up
so
the
awesome.
battery. What
Why
happened,
didn't
right?
because they make cars turn off at every
Right.
stoplight now. It's like
I
they're
know.
going the opposite. They don't want it idling. Yeah, no, but you're 100% right. You need to let that car idle down and cool. And honestly, turbos need their own oil. They need a separate oil supply. You cannot get a turbo which is running at 120,000 RPM, generating extreme heats, and expect that the oil that the engine needs is going to satisfy those both roles. And do oil analysis on any turbo Mercedes, any turbo McLaren, any turbo Ferrari, and look at the oil viscosity at temperature after 500 miles of driving, and it'll have sheared down to less than it should be. If it's a 40 weight, it'll be a 30 weight. If it's a 60 weight, it'll be a 40 weight. And the manufacturer is so adamant about that hot operating temp number. That's what's important to protect your engine. And these turbos burn up the oil. And, if you switch to like a PAO ester blend, it'll stay at the top of that range. It'll stay at the weight.
That was sorry, I didn't want to interrupt Mika, but that was actually the other thing that we were talking about on our conversation on the phone about the oil viscosity and how some of these manufacturers haven't really updated their protocol on that either.
Yeah, I mean, manufacturers are being constantly held to stricter EPA standards, which means better miles per gallon. And if you put a thinner oil in a car, then you get better miles per gallon. And then the car, EPA certifies the car, and then shortly after the car comes out, they say, oh, that oil is causing damage, so we need to up it to a 1060. And Lamborghini and Audi have done this with every V10 and V12. They say 530 is good, and then if you go to Lamborghini with your Aventador, they will put 1060 in. But guys like Gintani, and I know this for a fact because I did oil analysis on cars that he serviced, are coming back with a 40 weight oil. And it says right on the receipt from Gintani, it's a 40 weight oil. Because if you look up the original oil for the car, it says 1030. He thinks he's improving the oil by going to a 040 or a 1040. But unbeknownst to him, Lamborghini has internal documents saying 1060 is the oil they need,
So that's pretty amazing. That's another amazing discovery you've done. So I mean, I really that really was the point of this podcast, is to put. I mean, obviously you have your followership, and I'm still trying to grow mine. But I mean, it's very important to really go technical into this. But that's I'm surprised that I was going to ask you because I haven't really looked at a 48 up close and personal. None of them, even like we were Mercedes, don't they? But they do have the dry sumps, but they're not separating the
Oil
oil.
from the turbo and the engine, yeah. If they have a dry sump, that just means the oil's not sitting in the oil pan; it sits in a reservoir. But yeah, the oil system, like if you watch race teams, they'll have their own pump that's belt driven off of the crank, off of the front, that then pumps oil to and from the turbos. It keeps it in a separate reservoir. Because what you can do is you can use a much thicker oil with very few viscosity index improvers, and then it won't change weight. But you do have to warm it up and get it to operating temp before you start loading it. So it requires an extensive startup and cool down procedure, but
Right.
which is not really practical for a street driven car.
Well, but yes and no, because look, if we go back to the E46, and I mean, I'm wearing a BMW Motorsport
Hmm.
hat, but if you go back to the E46 M3, remember they were one of the first. Remember the dial, the gauge cluster. It always had its warm up oil
Yeah, for the
lights.
RPM lights. Yeah, the rev
Yeah,
limiter would move. The same does with the Huracan as well. The Huracan limits you to like 5,500 RPM when you start it up,
correct,
and then it moves it up to 75 or 8,000 RPM as it gets
correct,
warmed up. Yeah. Yeah,
correct.
and it's funny because you'll see channels like Engineering Explained, who is like one of the biggest YouTubers for engineering, make videos that say, "Oh, you can start your car and drive it within 20 seconds, and it's totally fine. You don't need to warm up your car. There's no benefit," and that is absolutely not true. If you just watch how long it takes your coolant to get to 90 to the thermostat to the middle of your gauge, that's just your coolant. Your oil
Right.
takes even longer,
Even longer.
and
Right.
if it's not at temp, then those metals have not expanded to the right size that the car was made to operate. That's why you have a thermostat that keeps temp at 90, and for most cooling systems, or oil at say 110 degrees. So yeah, it's unfortunate. But at the same time, when we talk about all this, how often do you see an engine fail due to a rod bearing failure? It's extremely rare.
Yeah, I mean we've had our fair share, right? Like the E46.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
just mentioning E46 had
yeah,
rod bearing
yeah. I guess
issues.
that's yeah.
The,
Those older
the
BMWs definitely, but like in Lamborghinis, you don't see it. In Ferraris,
no,
you don't see it often.
no.
The but
But it could. Well, I don't know. It's
you
a
don't
good
see
point.
turbo cars there either till recently either. That's another point, I
Right.
guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, I understand and we're talking about this, back and forth like it's not a big deal. It's not, it's so easy to do. And I understand their point. We all know, me and you both, and most of the people that go listen to this podcast, they understand like the manufacturers, the way they see certain things is like, well, how much, we have to, they have their mathematical equation that they have to work out per
Yeah,
unit. And they're like, oh, well, if we have to make a separate oil system, well,
yeah.
you tell me what you think, Mike. Michael, what do you think if you were to go ahead and separate the oil systems,
Hmm.
right? So the turbo engines can have their own oil system for the
Hmm.
turbos, obviously, and then the motor will have its own oil, so they could be completely separate. A system like that, it'd be hard to do the math, but let's just say that we're talking about adding, I don't know, 1,000, let's say $1,200 cost to them.
Hmm.
Let's put it. I think that sounds about right, right?
I mean, that's just your component cost, but you have to do a complete R
Right.
and D. Then that would be in the tens of millions of dollars.
Oh, for sure, for sure. That's always something that's kind of there. We know
Hmm.
R&D does cost that much, but
Hmm.
as far as them separating it, it wouldn't really be that much of a huge cost, except for the R&D, obviously.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, they could. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see someone as turbos start to get more prominent in engines. I wouldn't be surprised if we do see someone start to do that. But w- we just really need to see what happens with these engines over a long time. So I would see it more maybe in like, it depends on what the EPA does.
Right.
The EPA could say, hey, they are increasing the strictness of like how the emissions, how efficient an engine is. So if they suddenly say, hey, we see engine oils getting thinner and thinner. A 020 is the most common oil now used by brand new cars. Toyota exclusively uses it. Land Rover is using it. That's extremely thin oil.
Great.
But at some point, if it makes more sense to the manufacturer to say, okay, well now we're losing turbos or engines due to oil burnout, then it may make sense to then add this system.
Right.
But then it will inevitably have massive problems at first. Like every
Right.
time we see a new technology go into a car, there becomes massive problems and then a recall eventually and thousands of dollars of fixing it. So they're definitely going to wait as long as they can
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
something
They
like
have
that.
to. Like, there's always that formula.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So back to the shops. Miami has always been infamous for we're kind of taking over car culture. We really are. Florida, technically, I would say. I mean, I was just in California the other day. I'm going to be going back to California to go test drive this absolutely amazing platform of a car that is being developed in California. It's called the Draken. It's
Okay.
absolutely amazing. We just became an official dealer here in Florida this
Amazing.
past year. Yeah, I'm like super stoked. We'll definitely. I'll invite you back on the podcast. We'll talk all about that because you'll love that car. It's fucking. It's ridiculous. The
Nice.
the formula is insane. 2,000 pounds, 6-speed get rag with an LS3 out the back, and it looks like a Formula. It almost looks like a Formula style design car.
Right.
Street
Right.
legal. Sick.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing. And so I'm going to be going out on the 17th. Maybe I'll come visit your shop. I was
Stop
thinking about
by
that on Sunday. I'd love to maybe,
for sure.
we could do one there live, which would be really cool.
Yeah.
But dude, Miami, I would say that Miami and Florida are really taking over because of the politics in California. We all know
Yeah.
California was number one, in the car culture world. And I just think the politics right now are fucking so many things up that so many people are like, you know what, fuck this. I'm going to Texas or Florida.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in Miami, there's really look. I grew up with a couple people that we were very serious, hardcore car guys. We were always working on cars. One of my friends ended up having several of my friends ended up building a shop once in Texas. His name is Louis, super cool guy. He's from Caracas, Venezuela. We were all good buddies, racing buddies, and all that back in the day. I have another friend of mine. His name's Ray. He has a company called MPI, Miami Performance Incorporated. There really isn't. It's kind of crazy because there's so many the car culture, the community, and the amount of cars that are in Miami that want to get modded. The market is there.
Yeah.
The problem is trusting the right people in Miami. There's not that many high perform. Like there
Yeah.
really isn't that many that I would maybe say 4 or 5 in Miami that you could absolutely trust with your car.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's becoming everywhere. It's going to just get worse and worse until like you're saying, there's a formula the manufacturer has to follow. Well, the economy works the same way, right? And as it stands right now, mechanics and technicians, which the term auto technician is such a joke because they're just not technicians. They're not educated mostly to the level they need to be. So it's a very low paying job, kind of looked down upon job in a lot of communities. And it's a shame because the cars have gotten so complex and so technical. So right now dealers are straight manufacturers are having a hard time finding techs to work. All the old timers are retiring and it's leaving a massive void. They're trying to fill that void by using computers to make the responsibility for diagnosing and knowing what's going on not lie at the feet of the mechanic. But because of that, most kids who love cars, I thought I'm going to get rich. I wanted nuclear power. I'm going to get rich and buy supercars. And then eventually transitioned to being a mechanic, and I love it. I love my job. I love driving the cars. I love understanding the engineering but I had to open my own shop to make it something that was profitable because as a tech at a dealer, you're getting paid. Even if you're making $45 an hour, you're buying your own tools. You're having to keep up with ever-changing tools that you need. So it's just not. you don't feel
Not valuable.
valued.
It's not valuable.
Yeah, so right now that's the problem is if at the dealer they have the guarantee of like you mess up a car, we've got the money to back it. You got no responsibility, no pressure on you. And so a lot of guys go and take that dealership job where it's like, okay, I don't nothing to worry about. They're going to pay for my education. They're going to buy the special tools that they're not even going to sell to independent shops. So once you get to the independent field, it's very rare that you get good technicians, and that's something that I think Gintani, myself, Sheepy, everyone would say is the biggest problem in the automotive industry right now is that there's no labor. There's no one trained who's actually doing a good job. And there's going to be an impasse. There's going to be the price of repair, of good repair, is going to skyrocket until it affords a shop to pay for their techs to go to a technical school. Mechanics need to go get basic electricity knowledge. They need to go to a community college and get thermodynamic principles. And there needs to be a further education than just these trade schools, which are an intensive course rushing through things that they pick up very little. They learn most of what they're going to learn actually on the job.
Yeah, actually working.
Yeah,
on the car.
and breaking things. And that's where you're like, oh, I hate going to an independent. They're unreliable. I hate going to the dealer because they rip you off. It's like that right now the market's finding a balance, and right now it's very difficult. So I'm not surprised to hear that there's not much in Miami that you can trust because it's the same here.
I would say, and those are all valid points, 100%. There's also, because it's not just the automotive world that see Miami. Everybody, I love to talk about this. Everybody always forgets how Miami was incorporated, right? Cocaine cowboys, drugs, illegal drugs,
Yeah.
cartels. So as much as Miami has become an international hub for business right now, and I mean it's really become really amazing. There's this misspoken foundation where unfortunately, look, and I love Miami. I've been here for 30 years. The people are great. The Latin influence is amazing. And now you have the Russians here, and you have people from all over the world coming here to want to be here because it's Miami. But unfortunately, the business ethics, it still spills into the automotive world, and there's a lot of half-ass shit. And I'll give you a perfect example. The Formula One track that was made 2 years ago for the first Formula One event, that they finally brought it back to Miami, which we used to have the MotoGP, which was absolutely amazing.
Incredible.
It was in downtown. Micah, this shit was in downtown Miami, like the streets of downtown. We used to close it down like what you guys have in downtown California.
In Long Beach?
In Long Beach? It was like that, but even more insane. I went to it. It got kicked out because the residents started complaining about the Formula One, the real V10 Formula One engine sound. Yeah, they were complaining about that.
Yeah.
Anyways, so they took that out, and what they did, the track that they did outside the Miami arena, the stadium, the Dolphins, it's a fucking joke.
Oh, really?
Even the drivers were like, "This is a joke." And I actually personally met one of the third-party construction companies that was contracted as a third party. This was a $450 million contract.
Yeah.
And they outsourced it to a third-party company that literally just made a fucking look. This is what I called it. It's not, but I'm being exaggerated. But it really felt like they built an autocross track outside the stadium. I mean, and the drivers were complaining about it, like, hey, this needs to get fixed next year. This is bullshit. So at least, it got some attention, and there were some articles that were written, but it was ridiculous. Like the path, the track itself, they just laid down like some lines. Like it wasn't even, and this is for Formula One.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean,
that same mentality is something that unfortunately has always been embedded. Is it getting better? Look, for sure. But is it still there where it's got that half-ass shit where things get done half-ass a lot of the times, especially in construction? So it spills over to the automotive world.
Yeah, crime and that definitely has its toxic tricks that seep into the culture, and that's why I think my shop has done so well. Is I definitely pursue every job with like a commitment to virtue and moral that we're going to do it the right way. We're going to be over communicative. We're going to make sure if there's something, like I said, if there's a why we don't have an answer to, we got to find it. And I think that that's one thing, like with these pavers for these roads or any race team or any business. Okay, the whole modern ethos is like make fast money,
Right.
cut as many corners as you can, and
Right.
if you look at it in the long run, that very
Never will.
rarely pays off. It
Never will.
always, the piper comes demanding his pay at some point. But if you sit there and commit to like, hey, I'm gonna lose money because I'm gonna keep this car on the rack while I try to like, what is going on here? If
Right.
you do more than you're paid, you will be paid for more than you're doing. You will attract the people who are like, yo, you're my guy for everything. I don't want to,
Right.
I know I can trust you. I don't want to worry about it. Car's yours. You do whatever you want, however long it takes, and get it back. I know it's going to be perfect. And there is a massive demand for that all over the world. People want that type of person. And that's something that I think, unfortunately, everyone's like, especially in the mechanic industry, this is not my dream job. It's a stepping stone. I'm just going to do the bare minimum. It's like, no, I don't care if it's a stepping stone job. Do the best you can because you're going to learn things in this job that will literally translate to every other job you get in life if you just pay attention and pick up those little lessons along the way.
Right. The value that you're
Yeah,
creating. I totally agree
exactly.
with you. There's definitely the world needs more people, such as yourself, and I think that there's not enough people that. Well, I think now with information and education being so important, people are seeking it out. I mean, podcasts like this, you have Joe Rogan. I mean, is a perfect example.
Yeah, it's crazy how much hate he gets, and it's like, dude, the guy's literally just asking questions, and he changes his mind sometimes. Like no one on traditional media ever had someone on and was like, didn't think about it like that. That's my new thought process, and he does that, and you get people on the left like, oh, he's so conservative, and you get people on. It's just so nuts how.
It's not working. It's not. I mean,
Yeah,
that's why Spotify was like, "Here's $100 million."
yeah, yeah.
They
I
just
agree.
they just upped his contract 250 million. Um,
Dang, dude, he's
but it's worth all the money in the world because it's the direction in which
yeah,
everything should be going, and that's how everything should be
yeah.
run that way.
Unedited,
To be honest,
unedited, information
correct.
based.
Yeah,
Um,
raw
yeah,
and don't bullshit. Don't try to and
yeah,
no agendas.
yeah.
You know, like get two
Exactly.
people, and that's one of the reasons why. Again, that's why he was able to get that contract.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, man, we're here at 1:30. I don't know if you got to go. I don't want to keep you. I know you got
And
the cars in the background.
yeah, unfortunately, I do have staff and clientele that need my attention, so I'm going to go ahead and have to end this. But it's been great talking to you. I look forward to doing it again. Yeah, anytime.
Awesome, Mika. It's been amazing. We'll have you on several times. Like I said, I'm gonna be there on the 17th.
Great. Stop by.
Um, yeah, I'll stop by. I'll see if I can come. Are you guys are closed on Sundays though, right?
I do a church thing in the morning, but in the
Okay.
afternoon I'm usually here. I usually take my days off midweek. That way I go out with my family. And there's no one at attractions. There's no one out on the
Okay,
roads.
cool.
So yeah,
How,
I'll be here.
let me ask you a question. How far are you from Murrieta County?
Murrieta County, I'm not familiar with, so I don't know.
Okay.
I think, um, but you know what?
That-
I'll just be in touch with you, and I definitely
Okay,
can
cool.
let you know where I'm at.
Okay, cool. Dude, thank you so much for your
Sure.
time. Thank you so much for the knowledge. We'll have you on again. I'm gonna we'll go ahead and end this right now. Give me 1 second. Guys, thank you so much again for listening, and we'll definitely have Mika on several times because he's just an awesome person. And this is the
Well,
type of
thanks.
filtration that we'd like to do is like we want to have people that really have absolutely amazing knowledge and are good people in the industry. Again, Mika,
Thanks,
thank you so
Albert.
much. I'm going to go ahead and